energy around her saying yes, and we were just so grateful.
And she plays a mom in this film. She even has a very powerful birth scene.
I know many of you may have completely checked out of this saga by now, but I promise you this update is genuinely worth your time, and I'll do my best to keep it as concise as possible given how much has happened. Hello my friend, it's Perez, the queen of all media, the original influencer, and still your #1 source for everything connected to the ever-evolving It Ends With Us saga. After the Rob Reiner situation earlier this week, the drama appeared to take a brief pause, almost like the entire case went into timeout. But that quiet period officially ended tonight. Following Taylor Swift's rejection of Blake Lively's legal team, those same lawyers proceeded to file yet another motion requesting sanctions against Justin Baldoni and the Wayfarer legal team, which, in many legal battles, is often what you see when one side starts to feel the pressure or senses the tide turning against them. This latest escalation traces back to earlier in the week, when a Wayfarer expert sat for a deposition. Team Lively claims they were not given sufficient time to question this witness and argues that the deposition process was unfairly limited. In addition to requesting more time with the expert, they are now asking the court to punish Wayfarer's attorneys for what they describe as improper, disruptive, and unprofessional tactics used during depositions. According to their filing, they previously sent a formal letter to Wayfarer's attorneys Alexandra Shapiro, Brian Friedman, and Mitch Schuster, detailing a series of complaints, including allegations that one attorney repeatedly obstructed testimony through excessive speaking objections. They also accused the defense of failing to maintain basic courtroom decorum, citing insulting remarks, audible crosstalk, and even laughter during cross-exam. Conduct they claim directly violates the federal rules of civil procedure, established rules of civility, and standards of professional conduct. The filing goes on to argue that certain questions posed during the deposition crossed an additional legal line by touching on Blake Lively's sexual history and marital relationship, which her legal team claims violates the federal rules of evidence. From my perspective, when discussions already involve topics such as sex scenes, intimate dialogue, and explicit comments tied to the film and its production, questions about her sexual life do not seem out of bounds. However, Blake Lively's lawyers argue that these questions violate FRA-4, commonly known as the Rape Shield Law, which generally bars evidence related to an alleged victim's sexual behavior or sexual history unless its probative value substantially outweighs the risk of unfair prejudice or harm. The key issue here is that Blake Lively is not alleging sexual assault by Justin Baldoni, Jamie Heath, or anyone else, nor does her complaint contain such claims. At this stage, I'm actually eager to see how the judge rules, because a clear decision could firmly establish that no sexual assault allegation exists in this case and potentially result in sanctions against her legal team for advancing that argument. In their most recent sanctions request, filed late today, they argue that the alleged disruptive conduct is not an isolated incident but part of a broader ongoing pattern throughout discovery. They claim multiple defense attorneys repeatedly made speaking objections, sometimes in depositions they were not even defending, and used on their accord time to demean witnesses or deliver unnecessary lectures, all while consuming valuable deposition time. I've trimmed a significant amount here and spared you from the full filing, but the next detail is especially striking, for reasons that are genuinely difficult to understand. Blake Lively's lead attorney chose to include a transcript of a tense tit-for-tat exchange that arguably makes her own side look worse. As a result, we now have a newly unsealed excerpt from Jamie Heath's deposition, and honestly, it's nothing short of chef's kiss. That it's important to remember that this exchange is being offered as evidence in support of their request for sanctions against the Wayfarer attorneys. During the deposition, Ezra questioned Jamie Heath, Justin Baldoni's co-producer on It Ends With Us and the head of Wayfarer Studios, asking whether he was refusing to answer questions unless he read an entire document first. At that point, Alex Shapiro, one of the more recently added defense attorneys, objected and stated that if questions were being asked about a document, the witness should be allowed to read it in full to understand what he was responding to. Ezra pushed back, insisting that Heath had already read half of it, while Heath himself clarified that he had not and simply wanted to understand the material before answering. What followed was a tense back and forth over whether to go off the record, with Ezra repeatedly insisting they were going off the record and Shapiro objecting, stating that it was not Ezra's decision. Ezra ultimately declared that it was her deposition and that they were going off the record regardless. As the argument escalated, another Wayfarer attorney, Mr. Batch, entered the discussion, asking how much time remained. Confusion ensued over whether 6, 7, or 9 minutes were left, eventually leading Ezra to announce a 10-minute break with 9 minutes remaining afterward. Mr. Batch attempted to make a record before the break, but Ezra refused to allow it on her time, prompting further dispute over whether a record could be made without cutting into her remaining minutes. The exchange grew increasingly hostile, with Shapiro accusing Ezra of wasting time to ask improper questions about a deceased former client of one of the lawyers in the case, and Ezra responding dismissively, suggesting Shapiro's objections stemmed from being new to the matter. Batch pushed back firmly, stating that while he may be new to the case, he has practiced law for over 30 years and knows the rules. After continued disagreement, Ezra ultimately agreed to allow a record to be made so long as it did not count against her remaining time. Once back on the record, Mr. Batch explained that the parties had taken a break less than an hour earlier and had made clear they did not want another one, especially given that the same witness was scheduled to testify for another full day. He emphasized that the process was exhausting and that Ezra's questioning after the break had nothing to do with the actual claims or defenses in the case. Instead, he asserted that her questions had become rhetorical, optional, and designed to drive a wedge between the witness and his counsel while tarnishing the lawyer's reputation. According to Bach, this was how Ezra chose to use her remaining time, prompting him to formally object and preserve the record, the very exchange now cited by Team Lively as justification for sanctions against the Wayfarer attorneys. As the tension continued to escalate, Mr. Batch stated that he was making a record, at which point Ezra responded that if he continued speaking, they would excuse the witness from the room because, in her view, he was coaching the witness. Batch immediately pushed back, asking how he could possibly be coaching anyone and firmly denying the accusation. Ezra insisted that his conduct was totally inappropriate, accusing him of delivering a lengthy speaking objection with no legitimate purpose and emphasizing that there was no judge present and no reason to argue these points in front of the witness. Batch responded that, technically, a speaking objection only occurs when an attorney objects to a pending question, not when counsel is making a statement on the record. Ezra dismissed that distinction, asserting that speaking on the record in that manner was not permitted and characterizing his comments as an objection to the break, which she noted and then declared another break regardless. Frustration mounted on both sides, with Batch calling the situation silly and Ezra responding in kind, while reiterating that she did not want him coaching the witness. She told him that if he insisted on making statements on the record about the witness, then the witness should leave the room. Batch, attempting to de-escalate, said he would defer in every respect necessary to allow Ezra to make her statement on the record. Ezra replied that if he insisted on continuing, the witness would need to be excused, prompting Batch to instruct Jamie Heath to step outside while he continued speaking. As Batch attempted to proceed, Ezra interrupted again,